everyone. It's Wednesday. That means another edition of That's a Cool, where I talk about sites I see that you may find cool, gadgets, technology, and once in a while, I delve a little bit on the weather side of things. We're in the midst of hurricane season, and right now we're talking about multiple tropical storms hitting within a week, and one of the biggest things that is a problem is people lose their houses. There's a lot of damage. And I have an interview with Aris Papadopoulos, who wrote a book, and he is a 9/11 survivor. He was near the World Trade Center, actually right in between the buildings, and he'll tell us the story. But he also talks about how we can prepare to be resilient in the way we build buildings.
Well, I'm a veteran of the construction industry, meaning that I spent 25 plus years building things, providing materials, and building from homes to infrastructure to offices to everything. So, and I'm a 9/11 survivor, was at the World Trade Center on that fateful day. So after that, I started becoming more interested in why our buildings, homes, communities fail. Whereas more people ask, why are the hazards so severe? I ask, well, why are the assets so weak? And the more I look, the more I kind of realize that we're not doing things that well, and I had an inside view of the industry. So 5 years ago, I retired kind of early after running a business pretty much for 20 years and decided to dedicate myself to this area here of resilience, wrote the book, Resilience, the Ultimate Sustainability. Maybe you've seen it already.
Right.
And the book was made into a documentary that's being shown on PBS called Built to Last with a question mark. And I kind of, want to promote this idea of making consumers aware of what the risks are and what they can practically do, starting with their homes, starting with their homes and communities. So that's my purpose.
Aris, this is now the heart of hurricane season. What should people be thinking about with their homes in protecting themselves from the impacts, even though we're inland?
Well, I like to say that 80% of our, I call it resilience, our ability to resist and withstand the hazards, is at the time when we select our home. So the selection process is so important, the location we pick and the type of home we pick. The other 20% is pretty much what we do after that. And maybe, let's say 10, 15% of that is in any renovations that we may do and how we prioritize those renovations. Because a lot of us, just spend the money on cosmetics, what I call, fixing the bathrooms and the kitchens and things like that, and really don't put enough priority to the things that will help the house survive those hazards. And then the final 5 or 7% is what we do just before the hazard event happens. We know a storm is coming. Well, how do we prepare? Is it the sandbags? Is it the shutters on the windows? Things like that, the last minute stuff. But that's really the tip of is below, in our selection process. So, most of us are stuck in the homes we are. So, I'd like to talk more later about, what you can do if you're really in a house that's vulnerable.
Yeah, well, and given our location, we are in a place that is prone to flooding. I mean, central Pennsylvania, a lot of hills and valleys. And you mentioned picking your home. As a meteorologist, I picked a home on top of the hill. Doesn't mean I'm, as I learned, absolutely 100% guaranteed to not have issues. But we're prone to flash flooding and things like that. So what can people do?
Yeah, well, flooding is the number one cause of both human and economic losses. So, flooding, we're taking it more and more seriously. So let's say you're in a home and you know that you're vulnerable. And first of all, knowing your vulnerability is important. I mean, you can do several things to know that. One is the relative elevation. You talk about the hill, what is the relative elevation to that river, to that creek, to that low spot in the valley that, where water will accumulate. But for some of us, it may be difficult to kind of get that information. There's some tools and apps that have just come out recently, and the one I really like, and it's free, is called floodfactor.com. It gives you a free assessment on your flood risk anywhere in the country. You put your address in, you can, get the answer. So that helps. Now, if you want to get more sophisticated, there's some paid kind of services like floodscore.com. You pay, $50 to $100 and you can get a detail assessment. So first step is knowing, what your risk is. Now, let's say you realize after doing that you're at risk. You're going to flood because, of a flash flood or urban flood or even worse, let's say a river or a creek flooding. What do you do after that? Now, you can span the spectrum of spending a little money or spending a lot of money, and on the lot of money end is lifting the whole house up, right? Elevating the whole house, by 2, 3, 4, 5 feet. But that can be very expensive. So let's say you can't afford that. You want to do something inexpensive. What do? Now, most of us are used to or have, in the past filled sandbags and moved them around and put them in front of our doors and back doors and front doors. There are better ways of doing that. There are products now that, I've seen applied that I call barriers that you in either metal form or some kind of a rubber synthetic that either self-inflate or you can inflate them yourself. And those provide protection, let's say 1 to 2 feet max. So, that can kind of, reduce the amount of water that gets in through the doors by 1 to 2 feet. Some people can even apply those further from the door, just, surrounding the whole house, if you want to go as far as that. And you can find these barriers and dams either online or just go to a big box store and ask somebody there and they'll kind of point to you what kind of products they have, because in flood-prone areas, people are asking for these kind of things. So that's a low-cost, I think, solution. Another kind of low, let's say medium cost, is if the water gets to your house, you want to prevent it from doing damage. And the first thing you want to prevent it is from doing damage to the walls that'll be exposed and to the floor. So, you got to look at your floor. I mean, if you've got carpeting in the floor, obviously that's going to be damaged. So, I tell people, throw away the carpeting if you're going to, be in a flood-prone area. The best thing to have is like a ceramic tile, or just a stone, a floor there that you can easily maintain and doesn't, is not affected.
Well, I had some water issues and I removed carpeting. I mean, because once carpeting gets wet, it's done. Yeah. And I added vinyl plank, which technically is 100% waterproof, and I can lift it up, dry it out, and put it back down again. So I understand that.
Yeah, vinyl can work too. I prefer the ceramic or stone products. Those are kind of the more long-lasting kind of products. Also, you want to protect your walls, because once moisture gets into a wall, it's difficult to remove. You may get moisture and things that start growing in there. And there are coatings, there are sealants that you can apply either yourself if you're kind of a handyman type person, or just get a professional or somebody to come and do it for you. At least put in a couple feet of that coating, or sealant in the lower part of your walls. So, you can reduce the amount of risk of water kind of getting into the walls themselves. So these are low-cost things. The other things I like to tell people is, look around your house and see what are the lowest electrical, mechanical appliances that could be damaged by water. And check which of those could be actually elevated. Could you elevate that air conditioning unit, a couple feet higher, to prevent it, or that furnace, or that appliance, or even electric outlets, things like that, that could short circuit. And I don't undermine, in flood situations, the risk of fire. We think that, water and fire don't mix, but, we've seen in many events, in Hurricane Superstorm Sandy, for example, there was a huge neighborhood fire that started because of the flooding and burned a lot of houses down. So, the fire risk is as equally important in a flood situation as is the water risk. So think of, electric short circuiting, the combustibility of things that, are in the house and could be damaged. And finally, look at objects that you have that, you don't want to be exposed, to have them exposed to water damage, and move them to a higher floor or to a higher level. So, they're not down on the floor where, they'll be exposed. So kind of water resisting your first, at least, floor in various ways, through, the carpeting or flooring that you have, the wall protection, and also the appliances and furnishings that you have on that first floor.
Now, and one of the things that I find an issue, and I want your opinion on, is the fact that people, everything is short-term memory, and the threat goes away. You had the damage, and you forget. Just because you haven't, I mean, for example, we had that record flooding. Now we're in a bad drought. People are forgetting about it. Do you find that a problem in our nation? A hurricane hasn't hit my area in 40 years, so I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, definitely. That's a factor, not just in this country, but in many countries. And unfortunately, we have kind of the media chasing storms, but we really need them to be constantly informing us on a regular basis as to things we should be doing in our choices. I consider that kind of like a consumer-driven effort, consumer-driven resilience. One thing that I just introduced last week, and I'd like to present it through your program, is a Resilient Smart Home Buyer quiz, or I call it the Resilient Smart Quiz. And it's a 2-minute quiz, 4 simple questions, comparing in each question 2 different homes with their descriptions and asking people, what would you pick? Okay, here's a home with a nice kitchen, but it's going to be flood prone. Or here's a home near an earthquake fault, but it has a great closet and more space and so forth. What would you choose? Because a lot of people think that resilience is going to cost us more, but really it's a question of, we have a budget, okay, we know what we can spend, how are we going to spend it? And personally, I like to tell people, would you pick a house that's 5% bigger, or that will be stronger and resist the flooding or the whatever hazard you have, wildfire or whatever, wherever you are in your area? And when people kind of look at that, they say, yeah, I'd rather protect my investment than have that bigger house, slightly bigger house. So it's how we use our money. And we constantly have to be reminding people that they're making those choices, indirectly. Yeah. Unfortunately, the property industry, the building industry, I was from the inside. I mean, we market cosmetics, to people, from the builders to the realtors, and we don't give people kind of those ideas and those choices. So, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I hope, you're going to be joining in through your program on a regular basis, kind of reminding people of these things.
Yeah, it's an important thing. And again, we do get sucked into the eye candy. So you're saying go for that stronger house, that more resilient house, and then spend the extra money on renovating it to what you wanted anyway.
Exactly. And let's start with our own kids. I have two daughters who are now in their late 20s, but when they were in the early teen years in school, I was so impressed that they were inspecting where I was throwing my garbage. They were checking up on me, the parent, because they had been told at school that, it's important to recycle, So I realized then that we had a movement. So why aren't we educating our young kids, in school, how important resilience is and how important being in a strong, safer home is in a safe location? I think they could have an influence on their parents.
Yeah. Well, my daughter just bought a house, and there were problems in the past for some water because of the slope of the land. And right away, they're taking care of the issue. They're regrading some things, checking the French drains and updating it. Yeah, because you don't want the issues once you're in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I live in Miami, and Miami is kind of considered ground zero, let's say, for hurricanes and also for sea level rise. But during Irma, I didn't evacuate because I made some choices. Years ago, I said I want to be in a high elevation location. I'm at 15 feet elevation, which is a mountain for Miami, so I never have flooding. And the house I'm in, even though it was built in 1940. It can withstand 200-mile-an-hour winds.
Wow.
It was built with 10-inch thick concrete block. We don't even make that kind of block today. The standard block today is 8-inch. So you think people back in the 40s here, they already had realized the importance of, resilience. And I have a generator tube connected to natural gas and propane, so I don't go anywhere. I don't want to evacuate. So these are all choices. If we become more, I call it resilience smart, we can weigh the pros and cons of the different things we want in a house and make those choices that are right for us. And hopefully they'll be the choices that will protect our family and our investment.
Well, and I may be putting you a bit on the spot, but Miami, Norfolk, those areas are prone. They get what's known as sunny flooding, sunshine flooding. What can we do? I mean, there's so much in the way of buildings in places that, frankly, no matter what we do, probably are going to be underwater down the road. Is there anything we can do?
Yeah, that's a huge question, because already Miami Beach has spent $500 million elevating some roads, putting pumps to pump out that flooding. But I consider those bandages. Those are not the long-term solutions. And as they're trying to expand those road elevations, some homeowners in more single-family areas are saying, wait a second, the road's going to be about 2-3 feet higher than my house. What's going to happen to my house if your pumps don't work? It's going to flood even worse.
Well, and that's what happened with Katrina in New Orleans. It really was the pump failure that led to a lot of the issues. Yeah. So
it's going to become more costly to live in those low elevation locations. And, for some of them that are so valuable, obviously the money will be spent. I mean, I'm seeing houses. They're tearing down older houses right on the Biscayne Bay, and actually they're elevating the whole lot, even more than what the county is requiring. The county is maybe requiring, 2 feet. They're going up 4 feet, because they want to be that much higher. But their first floor, it almost looks in some cases, they're so high that their first floor is where the second floor of the house next to it is. So anybody buying that other house is going to say, well, wait a second, I'm going to have to do the same thing. So I don't want to pay as much for that house that, is going to have to be elevated. So it's going to affect property values. People are going to have to figure in these costs of adding elevation. And, we're just seeing the beginning of this, Joseph. We haven't really seen the full effect of what it's going to do to lending markets, to insurance markets, to tax revenues of cities, and all these things. We're just at the very beginning.
Wow. All right. Is there anything else that you want to bring up more about how people can educate themselves?
Well, as I like to say, I think it's a personal choice thing. I almost compare it to other things we do in our life. For example, most people don't know that the building codes are really the bare minimum. And really, they're at the level to get you to escape. They're to allow you enough time to escape the house, not to preserve the house, not to preserve your investment. That's not where the code is set. So most people think that, well, it's built to code, it's got the occupancy permit, it's got to be safe. Yeah, it's only safe enough to give you enough time to get out. It's not going to protect your assets. So we need to be thinking above code. We need to be thinking, doing better than that. And I like to compare, and I say, which part of our life do we choose the minimum? Is it in education? Is it in medical care? Is it in our food? And yet in the most important choice in our life, which is our home, the system puts us at the minimum and doesn't educate us that we should be doing better than the minimum. So, I like to bring that out and get us thinking and saying, we deserve our families, and really the nest egg of most people's investment is their home equity, to be in a safe, long-lasting, resilient home. So that's the most important choice we can make, to move forward.
Yeah. Wow. And tell us, lastly, a little bit more behind the motivation of your book and why you wrote your book and what's in your book and how people can get it.
Certainly. I'm a retired veteran of the construction industry, and I've lived through a number of hurricanes and even an earthquake, my parental home in Greece. But I was in 9/11 at the World Trade Center, survived that. And after that, started asking, why are our buildings and our communities so weak? In other words, we know what the hazards are, but why are we so weak? And the more I looked, the more I realized that, we're building at the minimum. We're taking huge risks for the future. And I wanted the public to really understand what goes on in the building industry. That black box that affects all of us. And that's why I wrote the book, Resilience, the Ultimate Sustainability, in a language that, the common man can understand, what's happening, what's been the history of, this whole industry that has evolved, and what forces are causing this kind of, spiral to the bottom. And I compare it sometimes to the auto industry. If you're old enough, you remember the advertisements of those dummies in cars crashing into walls,
Yeah.
And all the brakes. Well, back in the 60s, autos were very pretty. They had the nice, trimmings and all the chrome and all that, but they were not safe. They weren't resilient. And when the auto industry was challenged to raise the bar, first of all, they said, we don't know how to do it. We haven't invented, the solutions. Second, it's going to be expensive. And third, consumers, buyers can't afford to buy it. Well, guess what? They innovated. They came up with the solutions. They went down the cost curve, and they started, promoting it to buyers, where today's buyers, are attracted to safety features in cars, right? Yeah. And you wouldn't want to buy a car for your family that didn't have the latest airbags and, the collapsible steering wheel and defenses. I mean, you'd be considered irresponsible by your family and friends. And yet we need to bring the building industry to that, I call it virtuous cycle upward. Let's compete for the high level and not for the bottom. And I think my solution to that, because I've been inside, is we need to get the consumer educated. We need to get the consumer aware so that they start asking the right questions and start asking for these types of products, resilient products. So I'm hoping the media, people like yourself, can help in that education. I'm trying to do my best through my small nonprofit, but, I need, more help.
Yep. Well, I'm going to put a link to all that and a link to your book here on our website too, and hopefully we'll get the information out. Now, lastly, and you could say no, but I'm just interested because I'm originally a New Yorker. So where were you on 9/11?
I had an appointment at 9 a.m. on the 65th floor of the North Tower with the Port Authority, because our company had a terminal in Port Elizabeth. So we were negotiating the new lease. And I stayed that night in the hotel that was between the two towers, if you remember the Marriott Hotel. I stayed in the 22nd floor, I think. Yeah, the 23rd floor was the pool. And I was having breakfast with our general manager from New Jersey, who had come to the concierge lounge of the hotel. And he delayed us because he wanted to finish his coffee. So when the plane hit, we were still in the concierge lounge and evacuated the hotel and saw the second plane then coming and striking from there. And my story is documented in a book that came out a few years ago by one of the survivors of the people who had survived the hotel, and it's called Hotel 9/11. So one of those stories is my story.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my aunts worked not too far from there, and just the walking out of Manhattan and just what kind of feel was there. I can only feel what you went through that day. It actually puts chills in me from being from New York, talking about it again.
Well, one thing people don't know is that a lot of the jet fuel of the plane did not explode, instantly on impact. A lot of it came down the elevator shaft and flash exploded in the lobby. Burning, the people in the lobby, and that lobby extended to the hotel. So we could have been in the kind of walking toward the elevator corridor there and gotten burned. In fact, when I came down the hotel, they wouldn't let us below the third floor. We had to kind of move to the south end. And later I realized it because of the fire that had, occurred in that lobby area.
Wow. Well, Aris, I have to say, a cup of coffee saved your life.
Exactly, yeah. I'm not a coffee drinker, but my friend was.
Yeah, but hey, it was still that cup of coffee. Well, I thank you for your time, and I hope we get more people educated and we help promote your movement. And again, I'll keep in touch with you, and let's make sure that we're all resilient in the future.
Great.
All right. Thanks so much to Aris for helping us out on this edition of That's Cool. And I hope to see you guys next week. If you have something you're interested in, remember, email it to me at murgo@wtajtv.com.